Tennessee conservative Congressman Tim Burchett. Congressman, great to see you. Happy New Year. Congressman Schumer and Johnson, they teamed up together to continue the Democrats' inflation-causing massive overspending. The Freedom Caucus is calling this deal a, quote, total failure. Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene has said the honeymoon period is over for Speaker Johnson. You feel the same way? Where are you on all this?
Well, exactly what you said. Reduction in spending is not an actual reduction in tax dollars. It's just the projection of how much they're going to spend. And it's a pleasure to be on here, especially following my friend Chairman Comer, who does a wonderful job in oversight. There's nobody better at what he does, and he has made none of this personal. It's not been a lynching. It's going through with the facts. But getting back to the budgetary situation, it's a nightmare. When they said Schumer was on board, that just gave the Democrats in the House a free ride. And then you pick up 4 or 5 Republicans, which I'm sure any given day there's going to be that many, and they'll get them. And then here we are. We're taking in $5 trillion. What are we doing? Spending $7 trillion. And we're adding to that debt. It's up to $34 trillion, I believe I saw last, whatever that number even means. And so we've got to get back in our fiscal house back in order. If we don't have a border, we ought not to have a budget. We ought to just shut the thing down. We 8 million people coming over in the last 3 years. That's the size of Tennessee, for goodness sakes. We just can't continue down this. And without any agreement on HR 2, which would effectively shut the border, I don't see us moving forward with this thing. But I know what the reality is, and the reality is that we've told people what we're going to do when we got elected to Congress, but dadgummit, we're not going to do it. We're going to say, we're going to stop funding. We're going to stop funding the United Nations or something else. And then what we do? We don't do it. We just don't do it. And one group will blame Trump, another group, but ultimately the blame's on Congress. And voters have got to wake up and stop sending these moderates to Congress. I don't care if you're a liberal or a moderate, but this anarchy that we're seeing in our country cannot continue. We will effectively lose our country, Chris. Thank you for your
the anarchy, and the thing is, the anarchy's in government. That's where the anarchy is. And, I remember the good old days when in divided government, you had the Republicans getting a little something. I don't want 100%. I know the Republicans can't get 100% of what they want. But at this point, divided government means Democrats get everything and Republicans get nothing. And I don't know how many Republican voters are happy about that. Last thing I want to discuss with you, sir, is the controversy out of the Pentagon. Over the weekend, you slammed Secretary Lloyd Austin and his hospitalization. Austin is out of the ICU, we're glad to report, and has said he says he has no calls to resign. Well, you wrote, POTUS didn't know that his Secretary of Defense was hospitalized until 4 days later. That's how safe America is right now. Congressman, shouldn't every American be alarmed at the level of incompetence from a regime that is charged with keeping our people safe, and they don't even know when a high-ranking regime member, their own high-ranking regime member, is in the hospital?
Yeah, on my other Twitter account, just the @Tim Burchett, I really ripped them because I think it shows the complete arrogance this bunch has. They have never passed an audit. In the last 5 or 6 audits. They can't account for $500 billion in assets. That's unbelievable. And yet, what did we do? We rewarded them with several more $1 billion in the budget this year. Republicans and Democrats throwing money at them. We didn't even get the transgender surgery removed from it. What in the world are we thinking? We're afraid to vote against these folks. They hold all the cards. They're arrogant. They're in the business of war, and dadgummit, their business is very good right now. And when you have people on both sides of the aisle that have investments in war missile defense systems and things like that, and it's public record, you can go check it. And I know they all get ticked off to say it, but you and I both know what's going on. We are afraid to say anything about the industrial war complex. Eisenhower was right. And America ought to be ashamed of what we're allowing this Pentagon to get by with, because it's not being unpatriotic if you go against the Pentagon. I'll tell you that, because what they're doing has nothing to do with patriotism. It has to do with power, control, and greed. And we ought to be ashamed of ourselves.
The executive branch can't keep track when one of their own inside of the regime is in the hospital. How do we expect them to keep this country safe? Congressman Tim Burchett, sir, thank you very much. Appreciate the time and the straight talk as always.